Welcome everyone to Bookaccino Live for April. Got a great lineup for you. We're going to show you books for April and also do some May titles and look ahead to June. So huge lineup going on today, and we're looking forward to sharing it with you. Okay, we're going to start out for the top picks from the March afternoon presentation. We did a presentation in March in the afternoon, and then we did a spring presentation in the evening. So your first choice was The Underground Library by Jennifer Ryan. Second was Finding Margaret Fuller by Allison Pataki. Table for Two by Amor Towles. Lisa Scottolini's The Truth About the Devlins. Colm Toibin's Long Island. Rebecca Searle's Expiration Dates, and Chris Bajalian's The Princess of Las Vegas. And then the people who attended the spring presentation, which incorporated more books because we went into May and into June. Number one was Finding Margaret Fuller by Allison Pataki, Table for Two by Amor Towles, The Paris Novel by Ruth Reichel, Miss Morgan's Brook Brigade by Janet Skesling Charles, Colm Toibin's Long Island, Lisa Wingate's Shelterwood, and Anne Hood's The Stolen Child. And I've read many of these already. I'm listening to Table for Two, and you really do have a fabulous lineup of books to read for spring. Next, we're going to start with fiction and what you can look forward to reading. Starting out with Mania by Lyle Shriver. It's out this week from Harper. In an alternate 2011, the mental parity movement takes hold. Americans now embrace the sacred universal truth that there is no such thing as variable human intelligence because everyone is equally smart. Discrimination against purportedly dumb people is the last great civil rights fight. As a college instructor, Pearson Converse rejected her restrictive Jehovah's Witnesses upbringing as a teenager. Made impotent in the university classroom, she's also enraged by the crushing of her exceptionally bright children's spirits in primary school. Fortunately, she enjoys the confidence of a best friend with whom she can speak frankly about her socially unacceptable contempt for the MP movement. Until one day, the political chasm between the two women becomes incrossable and a lifelong relationship implodes. So there we've got Mania. Next, we've got Negative Space from Gillian Linden, coming on April 16th. Negative Space follows a week in the life of an English teacher at a New York private school. At home, her two increasingly restless children ask constant questions about mortality and often find hidden wisdom in the cartoons they watch on television. Her husband tends to his plants and offers occasional counsel between Zoom calls to Hong Kong and Australia. And at school, she navigates the currents between wealthy, increasingly disconnected students and bewildered faculty. She accidentally witnesses an ambiguous, possibly inappropriate interaction between a teacher and a student. She feels compelled to say something, but how can she be sure of what she saw? So there's Negative Space. Next, we've got Days of Wonder from Carolyn Levitt. As a teenager, Ella Fitchburg found love that consumed both her and her boyfriend, Jude. But her life was unexpectedly upended when she was accused of trying to murder Jude's father, an imperious superior court judge, and was sentenced to 25 years in prison. When she learns she's pregnant, shortly after sentencing, she reluctantly decides to give up the child. Ella is released after serving only 6 years. While she's desperate to turn the page on a new life, she can't seem to let go of her past. With only an address as a possible lead, she moves to Ann Arbor, Michigan, determined to get her daughter back. Yet a central mystery endures. Neither Jude nor Ella can remember the events leading up to the attempted murder, that fateful night that led to Ella's conviction. So there's Days of Wonder. Next, we've got Funny Story from Emily Henry, and you probably know her as the best-selling author of The Happy Place. Daphne always loved the way her fiance Peter told their story, how they met, fell in love, and moved back to his lakeside hometown to begin their life together. He was really good at telling it, right up until the moment he realized he was actually in love with his childhood best friend, Petra. Daphne is now stranded in beautiful Waning Bay, Michigan, with a dream job as a children's librarian and proposes to be roommates with Petra's ex, Miles Nowak. The roommates mainly avoid one another until one day they form a tenuous friendship and a plan. If said plan also involves posting them, if said plan also involves posting deliberately misleading photos of their summer adventures together, well, who could blame them? But it's all just for show because there's no way that Daphne would actually start her new chapter by falling in love with her ex-fiance's new fiance's ex, right? Sounds complicated, also sounds like a lot of fun. Next, we've got Within Arm's Reach by Ann Napolitano. And many of you know Ann Napolitano because of her book, Hello, Beautiful. Well, what her publisher is doing is re-releasing in a new paperback edition her 2004 debut novel, which charts the emotional life of 3 generations of an Irish Catholic family. Shaken reluctantly into self-examination by the unexpected pregnancy of its youngest member, the McLaughlin family is forced to confront ghosts of both past and present, and to reappraise its values in a world of rapid change. Narrated through 6 subjective first-person accounts, the pregnant Grace, her sister Lila, their mother, their parents, their matriarchal grandmother, and a family outsider with a curious connection, Within Arm's Reach dissects the markedly variant responses that such supposedly similar people can have to the same events. And we know how in Hello, Beautiful, Anne looked at the story from different people's points of view. So it's really fun that the publisher is going back and finding a debut novel of hers that deserves more attention right now based on what she had done before. And there's going to be news about us and Ann Napolitano coming up. If you signed up for our events at Book Reporter or at the Book Report Network newsletter, you know about this. And if not, you'll be getting the news soon. Next, we've got historical fiction. We've got The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo, which is out this week, and it's one of our spring preview selections. Lucia Cadado uses scraps of magic to get through her days of endless toil as a scullion in Madrid. When her screaming mistress discovers that the lump of a servant cowering in the kitchen is actually hiding a talent for little miracles, she demands Lucia use those gifts to improve the family's social position. What begins as a simple amusement for the family, for the nobility, takes a perilous turn when Lucia garners the notice of Antonio Perez, the disgraced secretary to Spain's king. The king is desperate for any advantage in the war against England's heretic queen, and Perez will stop at nothing to regain his favor. As Lucia's notoriety grows, so does the danger that her Jewish blood will doom her to the Inquisition's wrath. So there you've got The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo with a very haunting cover. Next, we've got Lucky by Jane Smiley coming on April 23rd. Before Judy Rattler became a star, she was a little girl growing up in St. Louis. One day in 1955, when she was just 6 years old, her Uncle Drew took her to the racetrack where she got lucky. And that roll of $2 bills she won has never left her side. Jody thrived in the warmth of her extended family, and then, through a combination of hard work and serendipity, she started on a singing career, which catapulted her from St. Louis to New York, from the English countryside to the tropical beaches of St. Thomas, from Cleveland to Los Angeles, and back again. Jody comes of age in recording studios, backstage, and on tour. She tries to hold her own in the wake of Janis Joplin, Joan Baez, Judy Collins, and Joni Mitchell. Yet it feels like something is missing. Could it be true love? Or is that not exactly what Jody is looking for? So there's Lucky. And Jane Smiley, as you may remember, is the Pulitzer Prize-winning author of 1,000 Acres. Next, we've got The Paris Novel by Ruth Reichel, and I am reading this right now. We're going to try and set up an interview with her, and this is probably going to be a bets on selection. I'm not completely through, so I'm not betting on it yet, but I'm telling you, I'm leaning that way. When her estranged mother dies, Stella is left with an unusual inheritance, a one-way plane ticket and a note, go to Paris. When her boss encourages her to take time off, Stella resigns herself to honoring her mother's last wishes. She and her mother really have like a real falling out between them. So they're so very different people, and that's going to have an impact on what happens to her. So alone in foreign cities, she falls into old habits, living cautiously and frugally. And then she stumbles across a vintage store where she tries on a fabulous Dior dress. The shopkeeper insists that this dress was meant for Stella. And the first time in her life, Stella does something impulsive. She buys the dress and embarks on an adventure. As the week and many decadent meals go by, Stella ends up living as a tumbleweed at the famed bookstore Shakespeare and Company, uncovers a 100-year-old mystery in a Manet painting, and discovers a passion for food that may be connected to her past. So with Ruth, the food writing is going to be amazing. She was the editor of Gourmet Magazine for so many years. And the way she tells the story is great. And if any of you are watching the story called, let's see, there's something edit. It's like a terrible title, and it's on Apple. And it's all about what happens with couture clothing. It's called The New Look. I'm sorry, it's called The New Look. And Dior is in it, and it's just like fabulous. And if you've watched that show and you're picturing her stumbling upon this dress years later, it's a lot of fun. And it's called The New Look, and it's like a terrible title for a really fun show, or a really good show if you love fashion. Next, we've got Miss Morgan's Book Brigade from Janet Skeslien Charles. It's coming on April 30th. Many of you remember her as the author of the best-selling book, The Paris Library. So it's 1918. As the Great War rages, Jessie Carson takes a leave of absence from the New York Public Library to work for the American Committee for Devastated France. This group of international women helped rebuild destroyed French communities just miles from the front. Upon arrival, Jessie strives to establish something that the French have never seen: children's libraries. She turns ambulances into bookmobiles and trains the first French female librarians, and then she disappears. In 1987, when New York Public Library and aspiring writer Wendy Peterson stumbles across a passing reference to Jessie Carson in the archives, she began consumed with learning her fate. Eventually discovers that they have more in common than their work at the New York famed library, but she has no idea their paths will converge in surprising ways across time. There you go, Miss Morgan's Book Brigade. Let's get you some thrillers and mysteries. Got Daughter of Mine from Megan Miranda. This was a spring preview title. We just posted a really fun interview that I did with Megan just before she went on tour, and it's a Book Reporter Bets on selection. I've been following Megan's career for years, and she really is knocking it out of the park with this one. And Hazel Sharp, the daughter of Mirror Lake's longtime local detective, unexpectedly inherits her childhood home. She's warily drawn back into town and people she left behind a decade earlier. She's not the only relic to the past to return. A drought has descended on the region, and as the water level in the lake drops, long-hidden secrets begin to emerge, including evidence that may finally explain the mystery of her mother's disappearance. So well done, with so many twists and so many turns along the way, and a lot to really think about is, if there's drought someplace, what does unfold? What do we find that we never knew before? Really, really a good job on this one. Next, we've got Robert Dugoni, A Killing on the Hill. And this is a book outside of the series that you probably know him for a lot more. Seattle in 1933, the city's in the grips of the Great Depression, Prohibition and vice. Cutting his teeth on a small town beat, hungry and ambitious young reporter William Schumacher gets a tip that could change his career. There's been a murder at a social club on Profanity Hill. I love that title, Profanity Hill. An underworld magnet for vice crimes only a privileged few can afford. Story's going to be front page news, and Shu is the first reporter on the scene. The victim, Frankie Ray, is a former prize fighter. His accused killer, club owner and mobster George Miller, who claims he pulled the trigger in self-defense. Soon the whole town is talking, and Shu's first homicide is fast becoming the trial of the century. The more Shu digs, the more he's convinced nothing is as it seems. And I really love that the Shu is digging. Got it? Lots of fun play on words. Next, we've got A Calamity of Souls by David Baldacci coming out on April 16th. Jack Lee is a white lawyer from Freeman County, Virginia, who has never done anything to push back against racism until he decides to represent Jerome Washington, a Black man charged with brutally killing an elderly and wealthy white couple. Doubting his decision, Lee fears that his legal skills may not be enough to prevail a case where the odds are already stacked against both him and his client. Desiree Dubois is a Black lawyer from Chicago who has devoted her life to furthering the causes of justice and equality for everyone. She comes to Freeman County and enters a fractious and unwieldy partnership with Lee in a legal battle against the best prosecutor in the Commonwealth. Yet Dubois is also aware that her powerful outside forces are at work to blunt their victories achieved by the civil rights era. So there's a great cover on this, Calamity of Souls. Next, we've got Close to Death by Anthony Horowitz. You know him as the New York Times bestselling author of Magpie Murders and The Word is Murder. Murder is definitely up this man's sleeve. It's coming on April 16th. Riverside Close is a picture-perfect community. The 6 exclusive and attractive houses are tucked away far from the noise and grime of city life, allowing the residents to enjoy beautiful gardens, pleasant birdsong, and tranquility from behind the security of a locked gate. It's a perfect idyll until the Kentworthy family arrives with their 4 giant gas-guzzling cars, gaggle of shrieking children, and plans for a garish swimming pool in their yard. The Kentworthys do not belong in Riverside Close and quickly offend every last one of their neighbors. When Giles Kentworthy is found dead on his own doorstep, a crossbow bolt sticking out of his chest, Detective Hawthorne is the only investigator they can call to solve the case. Because how do you solve a murder when everyone is a suspect? So there you've got Close to Death. Next, we've got It Had to Be You for Mary Higgins Clark and Alafair Burke. We all know that Mary Higgins Clark is not with us anymore, but the ideas for this book are what Alafair is writing from in her style. It's also coming on April 16th. 2 identical brothers seem perfect in every way, handsome, intelligent, popular, until a shocking summer night when one brother killed his parents in cold blood, while the other brother had an ironclad alibi. But which twin was where during the murders? Is it possible the 2 of them planned the perfect crime together? Years later, the twins are long estranged, each one claiming to be convinced that the other one is responsible for the death of their parents. Married now with children of their own, they may finally be ready to clear one name at the expense of the other and turned Lori Moran and her team to reinvestigate the parents' murder. But the under suspicion crew gets closer to the truth. The danger that was assumed to be left in the past finds its way into the present. So who did what? And they're going to figure it out because it had to be you. Remember, Mary Higgins Clark's, the titles from her books are all from songs. It was something fun. Next, we've got Darling Girls by Sally Hepworth coming on April 23rd. And if you want to check Sally's website, a lot of her, she's going to be touring, as Megan Miranda is. I might have not said that earlier, but Sally's coming over from Australia and is going to do some touring around the country. For as long as they can remember, Jessica, Nora, and Alicia have been told how lucky they are. As young girls, they were rescued from family tragedies and raised by a loving foster mother, Miss Fairchild, on an idyllic farming estate, given an exclusive second chance at a happy life. Childhood was anything but a fairy tale everyone thinks it is. Miss Fairchild had rules. Miss Fairchild could be unpredictable, and Miss Fairchild was never, ever to be crossed. In a moment of desperation, the 3 broke away from Miss Fairchild and thought they were free. Even though they never saw her again, she was always somewhere in the shadow of their minds. When a body is discovered under the home they grew up in, the foster sisters find themselves thrust in the spotlight as key witnesses. Or are they prime suspects? Definitely lots to think about reading this one. Next, we've got A Game of Lies by Claire McIntosh coming on April 23rd. Stranding in the Welsh Mountains, 7 reality show contestants have no idea what they've signed up for. Each of these strangers has a secret. If another player can guess the truth, they won't just be eliminated, they'll be exposed live on air. Stakes are higher than they ever imagined, and they're trapped. The disappearance of a contestant wasn't supposed to be part of the drama. Detective Vivian Morgan has put aside what she's watched on screen and find out who these people really are, knowing they can't be trusted, any of them. When a murderer strikes, Vivian knows every one of her suspects has an alibi and a secret worth killing for. And it's really funny. The line on this is, They're playing to win. They have everything to lose. And Alec Michaelides has said it's packed with suspects, twists, and turns. And this is Claire at her best. What's really interesting, my husband was in a restaurant one night with my younger son, and they were shooting a reality show, and he said there's nothing reality about it. They did like 10 takes. He had to sign something because he was sitting in the background and might appear on camera. He said they did it so many times, it was not a reality moment of the whole thing. It's really pretty funny. Next, we've got memoirs, biographies, and other nonfiction. And we're kicking it off with All You Need Is Love by Peter Brown and Stephen Gaines. They are the best-selling authors of The Love You Make. All You Need is a groundbreaking oral history of one of the most enduring musical acts of all time. Material is comprised of intimate interviews with Paul McCartney, Yoko Ono, George Harrison, Ringo Starr, their families, friends, and business associates that were conducted by the Beatles' intimate Peter Brown and author Stephen Gaines in 1980 to 1981 during the preparation of their international bestseller, The Love You Make, which remains the biggest selling biography worldwide about the Beatles. Only a small portion of these contents of these transcribed interviews has ever been revealed. Among other sought-after information, these interviews contribute definitively as to why the Beatles broke up. So there you go. All You Need Is Love. Next, we've got Fee by Alexandra Fuller. It's on sale this week. It's midsummer in Wyoming, and Alexandra Fuller is barely hanging on. Grieving her father and pining for her home country of Zimbabwe, reeling from a midlife breakup, freshly sober and piecing her way through uncertainty through a volatile new relationship with a younger woman, Alexandra vows to get back on keel. And then her 21-year-old son, Fee, dies suddenly in his sleep. She's painfully aware that she cannot succumb and abandon her two surviving daughters, as her mother has before her had done. From a sheep wagon deep in the mountains of Wyoming to a grief sanctuary in New Mexico to a silent meditation retreat in Alberta, Canada, Alexandra journeys up and down the spine of the Rocky Mountains in an attempt to find out how to grieve herself whole. So there we've got by the author of Don't Let's Go to the Dogs Tonight. Next, from Little Brown and Company, we've got The Secret Lives of Booksellers and Librarians by James Patterson and Matt Eversman. It's out this week. To be a bookseller librarian, you have to play detective. That's very true. You have to be a treasure hunter, a matchmaker, an advocate, a visionary, a person who creates book joy just by pulling a book from a shelf, handing it to someone and saying, you've got to read this, you're going to love it. Oh my gosh, I just love that moment. Step inside the secret lives of booksellers and librarians, and you enter a world where you can feed your curiosities, discover new voices, and find whatever you want or require. This place has the magic of rainbows and unicorns, but it's also a business, the book business. Meet the smart and talented people who live between the pages and who can't wait to help you find your next favorite book. So there you go, The Secret Lives of Booksellers and Librarians. Next, we've got The Wives by Simone Gorindo. I was lucky enough to sit next to her at a book preview lunch a couple of months ago. I was so interested in the story of this book and some of the stories that she shared with me over lunch. I am so happy to share that we will have an interview with her up this week. And it's one of the longer interviews that I've done because we got into so many subjects about, well, more background on the book. So here's what happens to her. When her new husband joins the Army unit, an elite Army unit, Simone Gorindo is uprooted from her New York City and dropped into Columbus, Georgia, a town so foreign she might as well have landed on the moon. One of the things you need to know is when she gets there, she doesn't have a driver's license, so she can't drive because she's always lived in places where she didn't need to. So with her husband frequently deployed, she's left to find her place in this new world alone until she meets The Wives. And The Wives gives us an intimate look into the inner lives of a remarkable group of women and a tender, unflinchingly portrait of a marriage. And that is a very good lineup of what happens in this book. And what I really love is these are women that come together that are from all different kinds of backgrounds, all over the country, and they're united over one thing. It's their husbands are deployed together. And I also learn a lot about deployment. It's not just about war. It's about her husband going off to train. Her husband going off to just have to do a quick job, but he's going to be back. Or something like, we're just going to do airplane jumps tonight to make sure that we're still able to do this and we're training. And it's all those moments we think of people just going off to war, and it's all the other things that happen in between. And who she left with is the wives. It's a bets on selection. I really, really think it's terrific. Anybody who read Kristen Hanna's The Women, which talks about the forgotten women of Vietnam, will enjoy reading this, because it's about the women who, with their houses are sort of connected, they're sitting next to each other, but they have nothing really connecting them at all, except the fact that their husbands are all doing the same thing. Very, very interesting story. Next, we've got another fabulous book, another bets on selection, called Did I Ever Tell You by Genevieve Kingston. And I'm really hoping to interview her as well. Genevieve Gwen Kingston was just 11 years old when her mother passed away, leaving behind a chest with gifts and letters to celebrate the milestones of Gwen's life in each of her birthdays till the age of 30. When Did I Ever Tell You opens, there are just 3 packages that remain: engagement, marriage, and first baby. Tracing Gwen's coming of age, the book reveals a treasure hunt, with each gift and letter unveiling more and more about her mother, her family, and ultimately herself. This book is just a beautiful thing that her mom left behind that she shares with us. And we go through each age as she's opening this and what she's finding. And it's often not something that's expensive but it becomes very precious to her, because there's always a story behind, or most of the time there's a story behind why her mom left this to her. And she's sitting with these last 3 gifts, and you're going to see what she's trying to contemplate as she's looking at these last 3 items. Very well done. It's going to be our spring preview contest that's going to run next Tuesday. So I highly encourage people to enter it. It is an absolutely gorgeous memoir. I was reading this and just could not put it down, so highly recommended. Next, we've got Everest Inc. I'm adding this because I am ever, ever, ever so interested in Everest. It's the renegades and rogues who built an industry at the top of the world. And I'm coming off a weekend where I watched a number of adventure films from the Banff Outdoor Festival that were shown indoors at Princeton. And when you sit there and see what adventurers do, and you see the people behind them, so interesting. So anybody who's read Krakauer's Into Thin Air, or has seen a recent photo of climbers standing in line to get to the top of Everest, may think they have the mountain pretty well figured out. It's extreme landscape where bad weather and incredible altitude can occasionally kill, but more so an overcrowded, trashed out recreation destination where rich clients pad their egos and social media feeds while exploiting the local Sherpas. There's some truth to these cliches, but they're a sliver of the story. Like any book to date, Everest Inc. gets to the heart of the mountain, the definitive story of its greatest invention, the Himalayan guiding industry. And it all becomes in the 1980s with a few bootstrapping entrepreneurs who pair raw courage and naked ambition with a new style of expedition planning. Really, really sounds like an interesting book. It's one I really want to get my hands on. Next, we've got Knife from Salman Rushdie. Speaking out for the first time in an unforgettable detail about the traumatic events of August 12th, 2022, Salman Rushdie answers violence with art and reminds us of the power of words to make sense of the unthinkable. Knife is a gripping, intimate, and ultimately life-affirming meditation on life, loss, love, art, and finding the strength to stand up again. So there you've got Knife, and I love the way they've done the cover on this. Random House really outdid themselves. Next, we've got An Unfinished Love Story by Doris Kearns Goodwin. And we're lucky enough, the staff and I, to actually hear her speak about this book a couple of nights ago at Simon & Schuster's 100th anniversary party, where they had an author event that was really terrific. There are a lot of events that I've attended through the years, but there's some that really stay with me, and this is going to be one of them. She was out and sharing what the story was. So let me read the description here. Dick and Doris Goodwin were married for 42 years and married to American history even longer. In his 20s, Dick was one of the brilliant young men of JFK's New Frontier. In his 30s, he both named and helped design Lyndon Johnson's Great Society and was a speechwriter and close advisor to Robert Kennedy. Doris Kearns was a 24-year-old graduate student when selected as a White House Fellow. She worked directly for Lyndon Johnson and later assisted on his memoir. The Goodwins' last great adventure involved finally opening more than 300 guys, boxes of letters, diaries, documents, and memorabilia that Dick had saved for more than 50 years. They soon realized that they had before them an unparalleled personal time capsule of the 60s, illuminating public and private moments of a decade where individuals were powered by the conviction that they could make a difference. A time like today, marked by struggles for racial and economic justice, a time when lines were drawn and loyalties tested. And she talks about how she finished this book alone as her husband had passed away. And what she felt was her commitment to make sure that this story was told. These have been such a big part of their lives. And her speech was absolutely, her talk was absolutely brilliant the other night. And you really felt like she felt so personally about the story. Next, we've got The Rule Breaker, The Life and Times of Barbara Walters. Little insider thing. I always thought I would be so much fun to be the co-host of the Today Show. And then I learned that they get up like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I thought, this is not for me. So I jumped out just purely because of the time, nothing to do with talent. So Barbara Walters was a force from the time TV was exploding on the American scene in the 1960s to its waning dominance in a new world of competition from streaming services and social media half a century later. In The Rule Breaker, Susan Page conducts 150 interviews and extensive archival research to discover that Walters was driven to keep herself and her family afloat after a mercurial and famous impresario father attempted suicide. But she never lost fear of an impending catastrophe, which is what led her to ask for things no woman had ever asked for before: to ignore the rules, misogynist culture, to outcompete her most ferocious competitors, and to protect her complicated marriages and love life from scrutiny. So there you go, Barbara Walters. Now we've got The Demon of Unrest from Erik Larson, a saga of hubris, heartbreak, and heroism at the dawn of the Civil War. It's coming on April 30th. On November 6, 1860, Abraham Lincoln became the fluky victor in a tight race for president. Southern extremists were moving ever closer to destroying the Union, with one state after another seceding, and Lincoln powerless to stop them. Slavery fueled the conflict, but somehow the passions of North and South came to focus on a lonely federal fortress in Charleston Harbor, Fort Sumter. Erik Larson offers a gripping account of the chaotic months between Lincoln's election and the Confederacy's shelling of Sumter, a period marked by tragic errors and miscommunications, inflamed egos and craven ambitions, personal tragedies, and betrayals. Lincoln himself wrote that the trials of these 5 months were so great that could I have anticipated them, I would not believe it possible to survive them. And it's interesting, my husband is a huge history buff, and we were down in Charleston, and he was giving me a play-by-play of what happened at Fort Sumter. And it's really fun to like watch things with him. We watch Masters of Air on Apple TV Plus, and he's giving me a narration of what's going on besides what's on the screen. So I never watch alone because I know I'm going to get a lot more out of him telling the story as well. So he's standing in Charleston and he's like pointing out everything that was going to happen. Really interesting. Okay, these are some previously featured Mike May titles to look forward to. We did these, they're coming in the first half of the month. If you missed them before or you want a refresher, doing it now. Got All the Glimmering Stars coming from Mark Sullivan. You know him as the author of Beneath a Scarlet Sky. We've got the Hazelborn Ladies Motorcycle and Flying Club from Helen Simonson, and you know her from the author of Miss Pedigree's Last Stand. Got a real crowd favorite of ours, Linwood Barkley with I Will Ruin You. Long Island from Cole Toibin, also who we heard from the other night. And this is a follow-up to his book, Brooklyn. Got Ann Hood's The Stolen Child, which is going to be a book reporter bets on selection and a feature. We've got Mary Kay Andrews, Summer at the Saint. Yes, summer begins with MKA, so get ready for that on May 7th. We've got Year of Living Constitutionally by A.J. Jacobs. As I said before, I give lots of claps to his wife, who has actually embraced every crazy idea that AJ's had. Got Tom Selleck's You Never Know. Got The Last Time She Saw Him by Kate White. Lovers and Liars by Amanda Eyre Ward. The Situation Room by George Stephanopoulos. And Think Twice by Harlan Coben. There's a lineup of some we heard about from us. And here's the second half of the month. We're going to start In My Time of Dying by Sebastian Junger, which is coming on May 21st. For years, as an award-winning war reporter, Sebastian Junger traveled to many front lines and frequently put his life at risk. Yet the closest he ever came to death was the summer of 2020, while spending a quiet afternoon at the home he shared with his wife and 2 young children. Crippled by abdominal pain, Junger was rushed to the hospital by ambulance. Once there, he began slipping away. His blackness encroached. He was visited by his dead father, inviting Junger to join him. "It's okay. There's nothing to be scared of. I'll take care of you." And that was the last thing he remembered until he came to the next day when he's told he had suffered a ruptured aneurysm that he should not have survived. It spurred him, a confirmed atheist raised by his physicist father, to respect the empirical, to undertake a scientific, philosophical, and deeply personal examination of mortality and what happens after we die. It's really interesting because he lost a really close friend whose name I'm not remembering right now, who was a war correspondent. And when that happened, he started to really rethink his life of where he was putting himself on the front lines. But what happens? Something at home. Next, we've got The Last Murder at the End of the World. You know, I've been doing a feature on this, and you can enter by this Friday to win one of 25 copies of this book by Stuart Turton. Outside the island, there is nothing. The world was destroyed by a fog that swept the planet, killing anyone who it touched. On the island, it's idyllic. 122 villagers and 3 scientists are living in peaceful harmony until, to the horror of the islanders, one of their beloved scientists is found stabbed to death. And then they learn that the murder has triggered a lowering of the security system around the island, the only thing that was keeping the fog at bay. If the murder isn't solved in 107 hours, the fog will smother the island and everyone on it. The security system has also wiped out everyone's memories of exactly what happened the night before, which means that someone on the island is a murderer and they don't even know it. One of our contacts at Source Books is just crazy about this book, and she was so excited about being able to get it out into our readers' hands. He is the author of The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, which you may remember as a bestseller. Next, we've got Lies and Weddings from Kevin Kwan. And oh, you know Kevin, he's the author of Crazy Rich Asians. And this is coming on May 21st. Rufus Wong Grisham, former Earl of Greshambury and son of the former Hong Kong supermodel, has a problem. The legendary Gresham Trust has been depleted by decades of prolific spending, resulting in a gargantuan mountain of debt. The only solution put forth by Rufus's scheming mother is for Rufus to attend his sister's wedding at a luxury eco resort and seduce a woman with money. You know where this is going. You know it's going to be fun. Should he marry Celine de Courcy, a French hotel heiress with honey blonde tresses and a royal bloodline? Should he pursue Martha Dung, excuse me, the tattooed venture capitalist genius who passed out billions like lollipops? Or should he follow his heart, excuse me, betray his family, squander his legacy, and finally confess his love to the literal girl next door, the humble daughter of a Dr. Eden Tong? When a volcanic eruption burns through the nuptials and a hot mic exposes a secret tryst, the Gresham family plans and their reputation go up in flames. You know this is going to be great. You know you're going to see a movie of it somewhere along the way. Let's get away and just have some fun. Excuse me. Next, we've got Malibu Summer by Libby Gill coming on May 21st. Ivy Bauer is a young, bright soil scientist, the inventor of a game-changing organic irrigation system. She's on top of the world when suddenly her husband is killed in a biking accident. Needing space to grieve, she takes on a summer job as a gardener in Malibu. Conrad Reed is a wealthy Hollywood has-been who, after the death of his wife, feels overwhelmed by the care of his anxious stepson, Hudson. Massive cliffside estate and a deteriorating career. It's a lot to worry about. He hopes Ivy will take at least one thing off his plate. But the bossy, opinionated Ivy isn't making things any easier for him. Sparks fly, but not the good kind. But that's when Ivy finds the key to Hudson's heart, that Conrad's own heart begins to melt as well, and the sparks that fly are the ones that kindle the best kind of love affair. There we've got Malibu Summer. Next, from Ruth Ware, who was also at the event the other evening and was absolutely terrific, we've got One Perfect Couple coming on May 21st. Lila is in a bit of a rut. Her postdoctoral research has fizzled out. She's pretty sure they won't extend her contract, and things with her boyfriend Nico, an aspiring actor, aren't going so great. When the opportunity arises for Nico to join the cast of a new reality TV show, One Perfect Couple, she decides to try out with him. A whirlwind audition process later, Lila finds herself whisked off to a tropical paradise with Nico, boating through the Indian Ocean towards Ever After Island, where the two of them will compete against 4 other couples to win a cash prize. But not long after they arrive on the deserted island, things start to go wrong. You knew that was coming. After the first challenge leaves, everyone rattled and angry, an overnight storm takes matters from bad to worse. Cut off from the mainland by miles of ocean, deprived of their phones, and unable to contact the crew that brought them there, this group must band together for survival. As the tensions run high and fresh water runs low, why the fans of this game show is all too real, and the stakes are life or death. So much fun. Let's see, you have 2 books about game shows, and there was one from Heather a couple last month. So, like, we've got to see that there's something going on here with game shows. Next, you've got You Like It Darker from Stephen King, and he gave a shout out to SNS the other night as well. You like it darker? Fine, so do I, writes Stephen King in the afterword to his new collection of 12 stories, many never before published, that delve into the darker part of life, as are rich and riveting as his novels. No, I'm sorry, both metaphorical and literal. For half a century, he's been the master of the form in these stories about fate, mortality, luck, and the folds in reality where anything happened are as rich and riveting as his novels. There's the line there, folks. Both weighty in theme and a huge pleasure to read. He writes the exhilaration of leaving ordinary day-to-day life behind, and in You Like It Darker, readers will feel the exhilaration again and again. So there you've got You Like It Darker, and you have to like it darker to read Stephen King. Next, we've got The Call to Serve by John Meacham. It's the life of American President George Herbert Walker Bush. In honor of the 100th anniversary of Bush's birth, Call to Serve is an intimate, illuminating portrait of a man who was so much more than just his politics. In words and images, many found in his lifetime of scrapbooks kept by Barbara Pierce Bush, John Meacham brings George H.W. Bush vividly to life. From the values of integrity, empathy, and grace that Bush learned in childhood to his leadership at the highest levels in tumultuous times, the 41st president embodied an ideal of service that warrants attention in our own very divided time. Next, from John Grisham, we've got Camino Ghosts. We remember Camino Island, folks. It's a new thriller on Camino Island. Popular bookseller Bruce Cable tells Mercer Mann an irresistible tale that might be her next novel. A giant resort developer is using its political muscle and deep pockets to claim ownership of a deserted island between Florida and Georgia. Only the last living inhabitants of the island, Lovely Jackson, stands in its way. What the developer doesn't know is that the island has a remarkable history, and locals believe it's cursed, and the past is never the past. So there you go, Camino Ghost. Also, we got word recently that in October, Grisham will be putting out his first book of nonfiction in 14 years, and I'm hoping to do something special when that comes out. Next, we've got Knife River by Justine Champagne, and that is coming on May 28th. When Jess was just 13, her mother went for a walk and never returned. Jess and her older sister Liz never find out what happened. As soon as she was old enough, Jess fled their small world of Knife River, aimless in her attempts to outrun grief and confusion. But 15 years after their mother's disappearance, she gets a call she's been bracing for. Her mother's remains have been found. She returns to find Knife River and her sister frozen in time. Jess plans to stay only until they get some answers, but their mother's bones, exposed to the elements for so long, just leave them with more questions. She gets caught up in the case and falls back into an entanglement with her high school girlfriend. Her understanding the past of Liz, their mother, and herself becomes much more complicated, and the list of theories more ominous. Got a chance to meet Justine when they had an author lunch for her a couple of months ago, And it was really funny because everybody was looking at her in the room because she had the most amazing outfit on. I know this is like a fashion moment in publishing. We've got to go there, folks. It was this beautiful vintage set. It was like a pajama set from the 60s, and it was just incredible, like reproduced. But she looked stunning in it. Jodi Picoult said this is atmospheric, sharp, and skilled at twisting the reader's guesses in unimaginable ways. And this is a debut author. And talking to her at the table, she grew up in a really small town, and to hear her, talking about it as well, you feel like she's got some chops in like what was like. Next, we've got The Second Coming by Garth Risk-Hallberg. You probably remember him as the best-selling author of City on Fire, which was also made into a show on one of the streaming networks, and I can never remember which one is which. Really got to figure that out. It's coming on May 28th. When 13-year-old Jolie Aspern drops her phone onto the subway tracks in 2011, her estranged dad, Ethan, seemed like the furthest thing from her mind. Convicted felon and recovering addict, Ethan had long struggled to see beyond himself. Then a call from New York makes him fear that his daughter is in deeper trouble than anyone realizes, and believing he's the only one who can save her, he decides to return home. So begins the journey that will push in time Jolie and Ethan, child and adult, apart and together, different yet the same, out past their depths. And Garth is really good at moving characters around, moving people around, and putting them into like these opposing situations and seeing how they come through. Remember that from City on Fire. Next, we've got Southern Man by Greg Iles, which is coming on May 28th. And Greg posted something very interesting on his website the other day. He is actually suffering from multiple myeloma, and he talks about how he contracted this. He was found that he had this when he was young, and it didn't manifest until recently. And he's in treatment now, and he held off on treatment until he finished Southern Man. And this is 15 years after the events of Natchez Burning Trilogy. Penn Cage is alone, and he carries a mortal secret that separates him from the world. But his exile comes to an end when a brawl at a Mississippi rap festival triggers a bloody mass shooting, one that nearly takes the life of his daughter, Annie. The sun-stunned cities of Natchez and Bienville reel. Antebellum plantation homes continue to burn, and the deadly attacks are claimed by a Black radical group as historic acts of justice. Panic sweeps through the tourist communities, driving them towards a race war. I'm not going to do that word. But what might have been only a regional sideshow of the 2024 presidential election explodes into national prominence thanks to the stunning ascent of Robert E. Lee White, a Southern war hero who seizes the public's imagination as a third-party candidate. Triumph over the National Party machines, Bobby evolves a plan of unimaginable daring. So there you've got Southern Man. Definitely go read what Greg writes on the page, and let's all keep like good thoughts going his way. Next, we've got You Are Here by David Nichols. He is the #1 best-selling author of the book One Day, which was recently made into a Netflix series that totally destroyed me about, let's see, I think I watched episodes 1 through 10 one day, 11 through 14 the other day, and 13 was pretty tough. 13, wonder why. So here in this book, Michael is coming undone. Adrift after his wife's departure, he's been taking himself on long, solitary walks across the English countryside. Becoming ever more reclusive, he'll do anything to avoid his empty house. Marnie, on the other hand, is stuck. Hiding alone in her London flat, she avoids old friends and any reminders of her rotten, selfish ex-husband. Curled up with a good book, she's battling long afternoons of a life that she feels like is passing her by. When a persistent mutual friend and some very unpredictable weather conspire to toss Michael and Marnie together on the most epic of 10-day hikes, neither can think of anything worse. Until, of course, they discover exactly what they've been looking for. Man knows how to write love in one day, and he does it probably once again. A couple of June titles to look forward to, or probably more than a couple. Here we've got Eruption from Michael Crichton and James Patterson. Michael Crichton, the creator of Jurassic Park, ER, Twister, and Westworld, had a passion project he'd been pursuing for years, ahead of his untimely passing in 2008. Knowing how special it was, his wife, Sherry Crichton, held back his notes and the partial manuscript until she found the right author to complete it, James Patterson. A history-making eruption is about to destroy the big island of Hawaii, but a secret held for decades by the U.S. military is far more terrifying than any volcano. So you have to see what these two put together. I have to say, I never knew Michael Crichton was behind ER. Learn something every day. Next, we've got The Comfort of Ghosts by Jacqueline Winspear coming on June 4th. This completes her groundbreaking and international best-selling Maisie Dobbs series. This is the last book in the series. Here we've got London, 1945. 4 adolescent orphans with a dark wartime history are squatting in a vacant Belgravia mansion, the owners having fled London under heavy Luftwaffe bombing. Psychologist and investigator Maisie Dobbs visits the mansion on behalf of the owners and discovers that a demobilized soldier, gravely ill and reeling from his experiences overseas, has taken shelter with the group. Her quest to bring comfort to the youngsters and the ailing soldier brings to light a decades-old mystery concerning Maisie's first husband, James Compton, who was killed while piloting an experimental fighter aircraft. As Maisie unravels the threads of her dead husband's life, she's forced to examine her own painful past and question beliefs that she's always accepted as true. So there you've got a full conclusion to the series. If you haven't checked it out, she's a really good writer, and that was a really good series. Next, we've got Shelterwood from Lisa Wingate, which is coming on June 4th. In Oklahoma in 1909, 11-year-old Olive Augusta Radley knows that her stepfather doesn't have good intentions toward the 2 Choctaw girls boarded at their home as wards. When the older girl disappears, Ollie flees to the woods, taking 6-year-old Nessa with her. Together, they begin a perilous journey to the remote Winding Stair Mountains, the notorious territory of outlaws, treasure hunters, and desperate men. Along the way, Ollie and Nessa form an unlikely band with others like themselves, struggling to stay one step ahead of those who seek to exploit them, or worse. In Oklahoma in 1990, law enforcement ranger Valerie Boren Odell arrives at the newly minted Horse Thief Trail National Park, seeking a quiet place to balance a career and single parenthood. But no sooner has she reported for duty than she's faced with local controversy over the park's opening. A teenage hiker gone missing from one of the trails, and the long-hidden burial site of 3 children unearthed in a cave. So we've got Shelterwood, where this is going to be part of our summer reading promotion. And sorry, we didn't add that to the slide. It was my error not telling Tom. And this is the best-selling author of Before We Were Yours. And I'm looking forward to reading this one as well. Then we've got Ben and Me. Let me see if I can link. I think I did that. Yeah, I can do that. Coming on June 11th from Eric Weiner. Ben Franklin lingers in our lives and in our imaginations. He is only one of only 2 non-presidents to appear on U.S. currency. Franklin was a founder, statesman, scientist, and innovator, diplomat, publisher, humorist, and philosopher. He believed in the American experiment, but Ben Franklin's greatest experiment was Ben Franklin. In that spirit of betterment, Eric Weiner embarks on an ambitious quest to live the way Ben did. Not a conventional biography, Ben and Me is a guide to living and thinking well, as Ben Franklin did. It's also about curiosity, diligence, and most of all, the elusive goal of self-improvement. As Weiner follows Franklin from Philadelphia to Paris, Boston to London, he attempts to uncover Ben's life lessons, large and small. So here we're in search of a founder's formula for a long and useful life. Next, we've got The Rom-Commers by Catherine Center. It's coming on June 11th. Emma Wheeler desperately longs to be a screenwriter, but she's also got to be the sole caretaker for a kind-hearted dad who needs a full-time care. Now, when she gets a chance to rewrite a script for famous screenwriter Charlie Yates, it's too big a break to pass up. Her younger sister steps in for caretaking duty, and Emma moves to LA for 6 weeks of the writing gig of a lifetime. But Charlie Yates doesn't want to write with anyone, much less a failed nobody screenwriter. Worse, the romantic comedy he's written is just so terrible, it might actually bring on the apocalypse. Plus, he doesn't care about the script. It's just a means of getting a different one greenlit. But Emma is not going down without a fight. She'll stand up for herself, for rom-coms, and for love itself. And she'll convince him that love stories matter, even if she has to kiss some scentless to do this. But was that kiss accidentally amazing? So there you got The Rom-Commers, folks. Next from Ellen Hildebrand, we've got the perfect cover for this book. It's Swan Song. It's her final Nantucket-based novel. It's coming on June 11th. Chief of Police Ed Capanash is about to retire. Blonde Sharon is going through a divorce. But when a $22 million summer home is purchased by the mysterious Richardsons, how do they make their money exactly? Ed, Sharon, and everyone in the community are swept up in high drama. The Richardsons throw lavish parties, flirt with multiple locals, flaunt their wealth with not one but two yachts, and raise impossible hopes of everyone they meet. When their house burns to the ground and the most essential employee goes missing, the entire island is up in arms. So Ellen's going to pull it all together in her swan song. Next, we've got Middle of the Night by Riley Sager coming on June 18th. One July night, 10-year-old Ethan and his best friend and neighbor Billy fell asleep in a tent on a manicured lawn in a quaint New Jersey cul-de-sac. In the morning, Ethan woke up alone. During the night, someone had sliced the tent open with a knife and taken Billy. He's never seen again. 30 years later, Ethan has reluctantly returned to his childhood home. Someone seems to be roaming the cul-de-sac at odd hours. Sign of Billy's presence keeps appearing in Ethan's backyard. Someone playing a cruel prank, or is Billy, long thought to be dead, somehow returned to Hemlock Circle? The closer Ethan gets to the truth, the more he realizes that no place, be it the quiet forest or suburban street, is completely safe, and the past has a way of haunting the present. It was middle of the night. Next, from Lucy Foley, we've got The Midnight Feast coming on June 18th as well. It's welcome to the opening weekend of the Manor, a luxury resort built on top of old secrets in ancient wood. The founder, the husband, the mystery guest, the kitchen help, all have an agenda, all have a past, but not everyone will survive the Midnight Feast. Next, we got The Next Mrs. Parrish by Liv Constantine. You probably remember her as the author of The Last Mrs. Parrish, which was a best-selling Reese's Book Club pick. Coming June 18th as well, with hard work and immaculate planning turned Amber Patterson Parrish from invisible wallflower to prominent socialite. Less than a year after her husband Jackson's tax evasion scandal, Amber reigned supreme over the Bishop's Harbor community. But with Jackson being released from prison, Amber's free time and money is vanishing. Meanwhile, Daphne Parrish left Bishop's Harbor after her divorce from Jackson, swearing she would never go back. But when one of her daughters runs away from home, desperate to see her father, Daphne agrees to return for the summer for their daughter's sake. When a ghost from Amber's past emerges looking for revenge, these three figures find unlikely allies in one another. But who is playing who? When all is said and done, they'll have to fight both tooth and nail for everything that they have left in the zero-sum game. There's The Next Mrs. Parrish. And look at that R. A little scary, huh? Next, we've got Same as It Ever Was by Claire Lombardo, coming June 18th. After a youth marked by upheaval and emotional turbulence, Julia Ames has found herself on the placid plateau of midlife. But Julia has never navigated this world without the equanimity of her current privileged class. Having nearly derailed herself several times, making desperate bids for the kind of connection that always feels inaccessible, to her at age 57, she finally feels she's got a firm handle on things. She's unprepared, though, for what comes next. A surprise announcement from her straight arrow son, an impending separation from her spiky teenage daughter, a seductive resurgence of the past, all of which threatens to draw her back into the patterns that previously had kept her on a razor's edge. So we got Same as It Ever Was. And from Chris Whitaker, who I absolutely am crazy about, and he's got a brilliant quote here from Kristen Hanna that says, kept me frantically turning the pages and somehow made me cry at the end, brava. And from Gillian Flynn, this book hit me like a sledgehammer, an absolute must-read novel. And I have this on my shelf. I am dying to read it, but I'm trying to read books in somewhat order. And oh no, that's not a good thing when you have a book you're craving to read. It's 1975 is a time of change in America. Vietnam War is ending. Muhammad Ali is fighting Joe Frazier. And the small town of Monte Clara, Missouri, girls are disappearing. When the daughter of a wealthy family is targeted, a most unlikely hero emerges, Patch, a local boy who saves the girl, and in doing so, leaves heartache in its wake. Patch and all those love him soon discover that the line between triumph and tragedy has never been finer, and their search for answers will lead them to truths that could mean them losing one another. Dying to read this, guys. All the Colors of the Dark. And then from Joyce Maynard on June 25th, we've got When the Light Gets In. Many of you read her last book, which I'm going to try to remember the name of, because this is the same characters, and if I don't do this, if I don't remember, Tom is going to jump in later and tell us. Following the death of her former husband, Cam, 54-year-old Eleanor has moved back to the New Hampshire farm where they raised 3 children to care for their brain-injured son, Toby, who now is an adult. Toby's older brother, Al, is married and living in Seattle with his wife. Sister Ursula lives in Vermont with her husband and 2 children. Although all appears stable, old resentments, anger, and bitterness simmer just between the surface. How the Light Gets In follows Eleanor and her family through 15 years, 2010 to 2024, as their story plays out against a uniquely American backdrop and the events that transformed their world. Climate change, the January 6th insurrection, school violence, and shaped their lives. Later life love, parental alienation, and steadfast friendship. And I believe that the other book was called Count the Ways. Will correct me later if I'm wrong. And next we've got Husbands and Lovers from Beatrice Williams, who's now with Ballantine Books. The pleasure of hearing her talk about this book at a luncheon a couple weeks ago. It's New England in 2022. Yes, she's writing in present time, folks. Amazing, right? 3 years ago, single mother Mallory Dunn's a 10-year-old son, Sam, suffered acute poisoning from a toxic death cap mushroom. Now searching for a donor kidney that will give Sam a chance for a normal life, Mallory is forced to confront 2 harrowing secrets from her past. Her mother's adoption from an infamous Irish orphanage in 1952, and her romance 14 years earlier with her childhood best friend, Monk Adams, which is cut short by a devastating betrayal. Then we've got Cairo, 1951. After suffering tragedy beyond comprehension in the war, Hungarian refugee Hannah Ainsworth has married a wealthy British diplomat with a coveted posting in glamorous Cairo. But a fateful encounter with an enigmatic manager of the hotel bristling with spies leads to a passionate affair, which will reawaken Hannah's longing for everything she once lost. The revolution simmers within the Egyptian streets. A pregnant Hannah finds herself snared in a game of intrigue between 2 men and an act of sacrifice that will echo down generations. Beautiful cover. I want to be sitting on the full float just like that, reading this book. But I don't have to sit on a float like that and don't fall in the water. She's perfected that. I can never do it. For April notable paperback releases, we've got The Golden Doves by Martha Hall Kelly, The Half Moon by Mary Beth Keane, Homecoming by Kate Morton, and we got a big announcement about that as well. The House is on Fire by Rachel Beanland, The Winemaker by Winwood Barclay, The Secret Book of Flora Lee by Patty Callahan Henry. Things I Wish I Told My Mother with a Newcomer by Susan Patterson, Susan DeLeo, and James Patterson. Michelle Obama, The Light We Carry, What Remains by Wendy Walker. Small, I can't see under the thing, by Dennis Lehane, You'll Have to Trust Me. With My Little Eye, and Within Arm's Reach by Ann Napolitano. So there's some books to look forward to. These are some recent book reporter talks to the aforementioned Megan Miranda. Anna Quinn and I had a fabulous discussion about After Annie, and I heard from a number of you after that. Tamron Hall, boy, is it intimidating to be interviewing the talk show host, but we did a great time talking about Watch Where They Hide, and she was just a lot of fun to talk to. So we have Kate Morton coming to us from Australia on for our next Bookaccino Live book group event. She is fantastic. I've interviewed her a couple of times already. I'm looking forward to hearing the questions that you want to ask her about Homecoming. It's a book within a book. It was a New York Times bestseller, a Bets on Pick, and it was one of my 3 favorite books of last year. Sign-ups available on Book Reporter Reading Group Guides, and we really hope to see you there. Our next Bookaccino Live book preview event will be a preview of books coming from May 7th to June 4th and a peek ahead of July. Gosh, where is this year going? And it's coming on May 8th. We're going to be doing this on May 8th at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Sign up is available on Book Reporter and Reading Group Guides now. And once again, if you sign up for our events at Book Report Network newsletter, which is on tbrnetwork.com on the section where we say newsletters, you always hear about events further in advance. So thank everyone for joining us today. It's such a pleasure to bring such fabulous books your way. So thank you so much and look forward to next time.